For 24 years, the image of his pregnant wife's body on the cold pavement haunted him, a tragedy born from his own hands. He ended his life in despair, only to awaken not in the afterlife, but in 1996, hours before he would drive her to her death. This time, the abusive gambler is gone. In his place is a man forged by 2 decades of regret, armed with skills from a future she'll never see. To the arrogant engineers who mock his education, he delivers a miracle of engineering that leaves them speechless. Zero deviation, they gasp, as he single-handedly saves the factory from ruin. To the corporate chairman who offers him a fortune, he has only one condition. I have to go home. I need to pick up my wife. He has one chance to erase 24 years of blood-soaked regret. One chance to save the woman he destroyed. One chance to be a father to the twins he never knew he had. He once gave her a slap that shattered her world. This time, he will build her an empire. The year was 2020, at the Bayside Royal Cemetery. The wind blew in from the sea, carrying a salty, damp chill that swept across rows of cold tombstones. Ethan Yu stood there, his white hair a mess in the wind. He had been standing for a long time, so long he felt as if he had become a stone statue himself, devoid of warmth. Over the past 24 years, he had personally laid 4 elders to rest in this hallowed ground, his in-laws, and his own father and mother. Now, he was the only one left. The mission was complete, he thought. He could finally go find her. He turned, his steps heavy and slow, and walked toward the sea where he and Iris Jeong had first met. The waves churned, a relentless echo of the regret that had never subsided in 24 years. He walked step by step into the frigid water, allowing its all-consuming power to embrace him. In his final moments of consciousness, he saw her again. He saw 1996, and the look of utter disappointment in her eyes. My head. It hurt so much. A sharp pain ripped Ethan's consciousness from the dark abyss. He slapped his forehead, and a thick, pungent smell of cheap alcohol flooded his nostrils, not the bitter seawater he expected. He felt his clothes. They were dry, the rough fabric scratching against his skin. Ethan's eyes flew open. Before him was not heaven, nor was it hell. It was a scene that made his very soul tremble. That tiny, single-room apartment, its walls covered with yellowed newspapers, the air thick with the smell of cheap cooking. But what stole his breath away was the figure sitting on the edge of the bed. Iris. His Iris. Young, alive, wearing that familiar floral blouse, looking at him with her beautiful eyes. And in them, he saw that achingly familiar expression of disappointment and sorrow. This wasn't a dream. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. He scrambled over, throwing his arms around her warm, real body, holding her tight. She was warm. She was alive. An immense wave of joy and gut-wrenching pain crashed over him, and tears streamed down his face, hot against her shoulder. It was today, June 12, 1996. The day he would never, ever forget. In his past life, today was Iris's birthday, and he, a scumbag blinded by gambling, had come home drunk, his only thought upon waking to win back his losses. He remembered shoving her aside when she tried to speak, remembered the frenzy of losing at the card table, remembered the timid look in her eyes when she came to find him. He remembered his friend Spike's jeering words. What kind of man brings his woman to a card game? He remembered his own rage, the flick of his wrist, the sharp, cracking sound of the slap. The image was seared into his soul like a brand. He saw her fall, tears streaming down her face, while he screamed the most vicious words at her, calling her a jinx. Then, she had left in silence. He hadn't followed. He didn't know she was already carrying his child, that she hadn't eaten all day, that there wasn't a single grain of rice left in the house. He didn't know that she had spent that night alone on the cold rooftop. The next day, he saw her body on the pavement below, cold and stiff in a pool of blood. No, it couldn't happen again. Ethan held his wife, his body trembling with fear. He had to change everything. The sudden embrace and the reek of alcohol made Iris uncomfortable, and she struggled slightly. It was then that Ethan snapped back to reality, his voice choked with emotion. Honey, honey. It was a hoarse whisper, filled with a newfound reverence. Iris froze. This Ethan was different. Before she could process it, a wave of nausea hit her. She pushed Ethan away and rushed to the communal bathroom at the end of the hall, retching violently against the wall. Morning sickness. The realization hit Ethan like a thunderbolt. In her past life, she was over a month pregnant when she jumped. And he, her husband, had known nothing. You bastard. Ethan slapped himself hard across the face, the sound echoing in the small room. He quickly grabbed a basin, ladled in some warm water from the stove, found a towel hanging behind the door, and rushed after her. Here, wash your face. You'll feel better. He handed the wrung-out towel to his wife. Iris, pale from vomiting, looked at this considerate, gentle husband and felt a sense of disbelief. This kind of tenderness was something from a distant memory, from when they were first dating. Just then, a sneering voice cut in. Well, if you two want to get lovey-dovey, do it in your own room. What's the big idea, hogging the bathroom? It was their next-door neighbor, Sharon. Her husband worked for a state-owned company and was about to be assigned housing. She always looked down on them. Iris's face flushed with embarrassment. But Ethan, contrary to his usual self, stood up straight. He gently shielded Iris behind him and looked directly at Sharon. Sharon, this is a communal bathroom, isn't it? His voice was quiet but firm. Since it's for everyone, my wife can use it for as long as she wants. He turned to Iris and said loudly, "Did you hear that, honey? From now on, you use it however you want." Iris lowered her head, but a small smile played on her lips as a long-forgotten warmth spread through her heart. Sharon was left speechless, her face turning ugly. Then, her eyes fell on the basin of warm water in Iris's hands. "It takes more than words to show you care about your wife," she said sourly. "Let's see you put a bowl of braised pork on the table for her. That's real skill. Anyone can talk big." The words pierced Ethan's heart like a needle. He didn't get angry. Instead, a look of pain crossed his face. She was right. He owed her so much more than a bowl of braised pork. He owed her an entire lifetime. He turned, took Iris's cool hand in his, and said, each word a vow to Sharon, to his wife, and to himself. "Who says we can't have braised pork? We're not just having it today. From now on, whenever you want it, I'll make it for you every single day." Back in their room, Ethan helped Iris sit on the bed. He knelt before her, looking up with an unprecedented seriousness. "Honey, believe me. From now on, I'll make sure you can eat braised pork every day." Iris looked into his deep eyes, confused, assuming he was just saying it out of pride. Ethan didn't explain further. He stood up and checked the rice barrel. Empty. The oil pot was nearly dry. He lifted the mesh cover on the table. Underneath was half a bowl of watery tofu, without a single drop of oil in sight. Iris thought he was about to lose his temper and whispered, "This month, I sent some money back home, so—" Ethan cut her off, his voice impossibly gentle. "It's okay. From now on, I'll take care of everything at home." He picked up the woven basket his father had made, planted a soft kiss on Iris's forehead, and whispered, "You get some rest. I'm going to buy groceries." Outside the dilapidated communal apartment building, the June sun was harsh. Ethan felt the few dozen bills in his pocket, an advance on his salary from the manufacturing plant. In his past life, that money had vanished at the card table. Today, it was the seed for a new beginning. He first stopped at a small bakery and spent $3 on their smallest cake. In those days, it was a luxury. He asked the baker to write, "Happy birthday, honey," on it in red frosting. Then, carrying the cake in its delicate box, he hurried to the market. Old man Zhang, the butcher, saw him coming and put on his usual fake smile, assuming Ethan was there to buy on credit again. Ethan wasted no words, slapping two $10 bills on the chopping block. "Mr. Zhang, 2 pounds of ribs, a pound of pork belly, and a pork knuckle. Please chop the ribs and knuckle for me." The butcher's eyes lit up, his attitude instantly becoming 10 times more enthusiastic. After buying the meat, he bought fresh carrots, cucumbers, and even 2 pounds of tender lotus pods, Iris's favorite. Finally, he hauled a 10-pound bag of rice and a large bottle of cooking oil. The basket was heavy, making his arm ache, but his steps were lighter than they had ever been. When he got home and pushed open the door, the sight of Iris sitting quietly by the bed finally settled his heart. Iris saw him and quickly stood up to take the heavy basket. When she saw it filled with meat and fresh vegetables and the green lotus pods, she froze. She took out a handkerchief, stood on her toes, and gently wiped the sweat from his brow. Feeling the cool touch of her fingertips and the tenderness in her gesture, Ethan broke into a wide, goofy grin. A blush crept up Iris's cheeks. She looked at this husband who was both familiar and a stranger, a mix of emotions swirling within her. She lowered her head, her voice as soft as the wind. "Thank you, Ethan." Iris's soft, "thank you," felt like a searing needle in Ethan's heart, yet it brought a comforting warmth. What he owed her was more than a meal or a few kind words. He owed her an entire life. Unable to control himself, he stepped forward and gently pulled her soft body into his arms. Her familiar, faint scent instantly soothed the restless anxiety that had plagued his soul for over 2 decades. Iris stiffened for a moment, then relaxed, letting him hold her. She didn't know why Ethan had changed so drastically, but this embrace felt warm and safe. After a long moment, Ethan released her, his eyes a little red. He bent down, took 2 green lotus pods from the basket, and placed them in her hands. His voice was hoarse, deliberately suppressed. "Honey, try these. See if they're fresh." Iris took one and handed the other back to him. "You have one too." Ethan accepted it with a smile, watching her as she sat on a small stool. Her slender fingers peeled the seeds, carefully removing the bitter green sprout from the center before popping one into her mouth. Sunlight streamed through the window, bathing her in a soft glow. It was a picture of serene beauty, just like the day they first met. Ethan's heart had never been so calm. He stored the rice and oil on the wooden shelf his father had built, then secretly hid the small birthday cake in the back of a cupboard, planning a bigger surprise. After that, he looked at the remaining meat. In the June heat, there was no way the two of them could finish it all before it spoiled. He rewrapped the pork knuckle and some of the ribs. Iris, he said, there's too much meat. I'm going to ask Mr. Zhang downstairs to keep it in his freezer for us so it doesn't go bad. Mr. Zhang was a veteran of the Korean War, in his 60s with no children, who ran a small convenience store to get by. He was usually stern-faced and had often lectured Ethan for his irresponsible ways. Ethan first handed him a newly bought pack of Marlboros before stating his request. Mr. Zhang sized him up, a flicker of surprise in his weary eyes at the sight of the young man actually buying meat to dote on his wife. He grunted his approval. Go ahead. Be careful, don't break anything. Ethan thanked him and carefully placed the meat in the humming freezer, already calculating his next move. That pack of cigarettes was the first brick laid on his new path. When he returned, Iris was already cooking rice. In an era without rice cookers, using an aluminum pot was a delicate art. Seeing his wife busy by the stove brought a pang to Ethan's heart. He walked over, took the pot from her hands, and picked up the vegetable basin. Iris, he said seriously, from now on, when I'm home, I'll do all this. You don't have to lift a finger. With that, he went to the communal sink in the hallway and began washing the meat and vegetables. As his hands moved with practiced skill, his mind raced with plans for the future. This apartment was too small, without even a private bathroom, completely unsuitable for a pregnant woman. He had to make money, and fast. He needed to rent a 2-bedroom place, buy a rice cooker, and have her quit her job to rest and focus on the pregnancy. These thoughts burned within him like a fire. Soon, a plate of crisp smashed cucumber salad, a pot of rich pork rib and carrot soup, and a bowl of glistening, fragrant braised pork were ready. The potent aroma of soy sauce, sugar, and meat filled the entire floor. Neighbors poked their heads out, swallowing hard. Sharon, who had mocked Ethan earlier, could only glare before slamming her door shut. Ethan deliberately raised his voice. Honey, dinner's ready. Time for braised pork. He brought the dishes into their room, first ladling a bowl of hot soup for Iris while he dug into his own bowl of plain rice. Iris watched him. Aren't you having any soup? She asked softly. I don't like it, Ethan replied without looking up. How could he not like it? But this soup was for her, and for their unborn child. Halfway through the meal, Ethan produced the small, ornate birthday cake from the cupboard, as if by magic. When Iris saw the words, Happy Birthday, Honey, written in frosting, she gasped, covering her mouth as her eyes instantly welled up. Ethan leaned in and pressed a deep kiss to her forehead, his voice low and full of apology. Happy birthday, honey. I'm so sorry. In all these years, I never once remembered your birthday. From now on, I'll celebrate it with you every single year. Fat tears rolled down Iris's cheeks. She choked back a sob and, on her own accord, reached out and gently hugged him. Thank you. This time, it wasn't hesitant. It was heartfelt. That afternoon, their tiny room was filled with Ethan's slightly off-key rendition of the birthday song. They shared the small cake, their smiles brighter than the sun outside. After dinner, Ethan insisted on washing the dishes, to the astonishment of their neighbors. He lay down beside his wife. Iris, perhaps due to her pregnancy, fell asleep quickly, her light snores filling the quiet room. But Ethan was wide awake. He carefully slipped his arm out from under her head, watching her peaceful face. The desire to earn money was a raging inferno inside him. He couldn't wait any longer. He quietly got up, left a note, and rode his old, second-hand bicycle to the factory, well ahead of his shift. He went straight to the factory manager's office. Gordon Goo's brow furrowed the moment he saw him, assuming the kid was there to ask for another salary advance. He had a love-hate relationship with Ethan. The kid was the most skilled technician in the factory, but also the laziest and a compulsive gambler. Spit it out, Gordon grumbled, tapping his desk impatiently. Ethan offered him a cigarette and said calmly, Mr. Goo, I'd like to adjust my evening shift. I want to work from 4 in the afternoon to midnight. My wife is pregnant, and I need to take care of her during the day. Gordon almost couldn't believe his ears. Had this kid completely changed? Before he could approve, the workshop supervisor, Louis Liu, burst in, sweating and frantic. Mr. Goo, it's bad. The CNC machines program is corrupted. The whole batch for the Shanghai order. It's all scrap. Gordon's face went white. That order was critical to the factory's survival. What are you standing there for? Call Engineer Shaw. Engineer Shaw's wife just had a baby. He took a week off to go back to his hometown. There's no way he can make it back in time. Gordon slumped into his chair, utterly defeated. A dead silence fell over the office, broken only by Louis's heavy breathing. Ethan stood at the door, having heard everything. He remembered. In his previous life, this incident caused the factory to lose its biggest contract. Gordon was disciplined, and Louis was demoted. Just as Gordon was about to angrily wave him away, Ethan stood his ground and dropped a bombshell in a casual tone. Sir, perhaps. I could give it a try. Gordon and Louis looked up at the same time, staring at him as if he were a ghost. Gordon exploded. Are you trying to cause more trouble? Get out. But Ethan just shrugged. If I leave, do you have a better idea? The question hit the two managers where it hurt. With nothing left to lose, Louis was the first to waver. Ethan, you really think you can do something? Finally, gritting his teeth, Gordon led Ethan to the workshop. Under the stunned gazes of all the workers, Ethan walked up to the paralyzed CNC machine. He first studied the blueprints, then sat at the computer. His long, slender fingers danced across the oil-stained keyboard, typing out a dazzling string of code. In his past life, navigating the business world had forced him to master these technical skills until they were second nature. Gordon and Lewis watched, dumbfounded. Was this the same slacker they knew? In less than 10 minutes, Ethan stopped. Found the problem. There's a critical, low-level error in the fourth subroutine. Let me fix it, and then we can run a test piece. He not only fixed the program, but also pointed out that the cutting tool hadn't been sharpened correctly. Half an hour later, as the first new part emerged under everyone's anxious watch, Lewis measured it with a micrometer, his hands trembling. He stammered, "Mr. Goo, I've never seen such a precise product. The tolerance. There's zero error." Gordon snatched the part. The perfect finish and smooth surface left him completely stunned. He turned his head and looked at the calm young man, feeling like he was in a dream. This kid, he was a hidden genius. Ethan ultimately declined the celebratory drinks offered by Gordon and Lewis. Citing his wife at home, he politely excused himself. But as he turned and closed the office door, he didn't leave immediately. He pressed himself against the thin wooden door like a shadow, holding his breath to listen. Gordon's booming voice, laced with disbelief and excitement, carried through. "Lewis, what do you make of that kid? How did he suddenly get so good? It's like he's a different person." Lewis's reply, tinged with a regional accent, was equally baffled. "If you don't know, how would I? But a talent like that is wasted in the finishing workshop. We should move him over to my section, make him a provisional supervisor. We can make it permanent later." Hearing this, Ethan's mind raced. A supervisor. That meant an extra $200 a month. With bonuses and his base pay, he could make $700 or $800 a month. The number was a beacon, illuminating his vision for the future. He heard Gordon hesitate, worried about his lazy disposition. But Lewis argued forcefully, convinced that Ethan was changing. Finally, Gordon made the decision. He would talk to Ethan about it tomorrow. A confident smile touched Ethan's lips. He lingered no longer, hurrying downstairs, humming a tuneless little song. Even the wind felt lighter as he pedaled his squeaky, second-hand bicycle home. On the way, a familiar figure stopped him. "Ethan, no work today?" It was Spike, the man whose taunts at the card table had indirectly led to the tragedy in his past life. Ethan's gaze turned cold. "The manager gave me the day off," he said flatly. Spike's beady eyes lit up. "Perfect timing. We're short one player. Come on, let's play some cards." Ethan stopped his bike, one foot on the ground, his eyes calm but firm. "No thanks. I'm going home." "Spike, don't call me for this kind of thing anymore." Spike's grin froze, then twisted into a sneer. "Well, look at you. Has hell frozen over? You're quitting gambling? I'll be waiting for you to come crawling back." Ethan didn't say another word. He pushed off hard, the bicycle carrying him away, decisively leaving that sordid part of his past behind. It was nearly dusk when he arrived home. Iris was sitting on the edge of the bed, a lost look in her eyes. When she saw him, a flicker of surprise and caution crossed her face. "You're back? Didn't you? Go to work." Her voice was tentative, probing. A pang of guilt hit Ethan. He knew what she was thinking. He smiled and explained. "The manager gave me a special day off, with pay." Not giving her a chance to ask more questions, he started reheating their dinner. As the familiar aroma once again filled the small room, Ethan did something that felt foreign even to himself. He took all the money he had left from his pocket, $35 in total. He kept $5 for himself and placed the 3 $10 bills squarely in Iris's palm. "Honey, you keep this. From now on, I'll give you all my wages." Iris stared at the money, still warm from his touch, and her eyes immediately welled up. The shocks of the day had been too much, making her feel as if she were in a dream. Ethan stepped closer, gently wrapping an arm around her waist and burying his face in the crook of her neck. His voice was low and powerful, like an oath. "Honey, trust me. I will never gamble again." Those words were a warm current, instantly melting the last block of ice around Iris's heart. She leaned against his shoulder, and after a long moment, she whispered, her voice barely audible, "Ethan, you're going to be a father." Though he already knew, hearing the words from her lips sent a wave of pure elation through him. He hugged her tighter, then quickly let go, flustered. I don't want to crush the baby." Seeing his awkwardness, Iris let out a small laugh, the dimples at the corners of her mouth appearing. Ethan looked at her long unseen smile and couldn't help but lean down and gently kiss her. He suggested she quit her job at the department store to rest. Iris hesitated, worried about their financial situation. Ethan didn't push. He knew trust had to be earned over time. After dinner, he said, "Iris, it's stuffy in here. Let's go for a walk." Iris looked back in surprise. Walks were something Ethan used to hate. Ethan scratched his head, making up an excuse. "I heard that a walk after dinner is good for the baby." So it was for the baby. A tiny sliver of disappointment passed through Iris's heart, but she still nodded. They walked one behind the other through the noisy communal building toward the nearby Riverside Park. The evening breeze was cool, chasing away the day's heat. Ethan carefully wiped the dust from a concrete bench with his sleeve before letting her sit. The cicadas buzzed tirelessly in the trees. Iris watched the light shimmering on the river in the distance, a serene smile on her face. "You like it here?" Ethan asked softly. Iris nodded. "If you like it, then when I'm not on the night shift, I'll come here with you every day." "Really?" She turned her head, her eyes shining like they were filled with stars. Such a simple promise made her so happy. An overwhelming sense of regret and tenderness washed over Ethan. Slowly, he rested his head on Iris's thin shoulder, like a lost child who had finally found his way home. The next day, Iris went to work as usual. Ethan planned to go to the factory in the afternoon. He was anxious to know the final outcome of that crucial order. At 3:30, his alarm went off. He quickly washed up, left a note for his wife, and rode off. But before he even reached the factory gates, he saw a familiar figure pacing anxiously out front, craning his neck. It was the factory manager, Gordon Gu. The moment Gordon saw Ethan, his face broke into a huge smile, and he actually trotted over to meet him. "Ethan, you're finally here." Ethan was taken aback by this reception. Gordon grabbed his arm and practically dragged him toward the office building, even yelling for the gatekeeper to park his bike for him. The scene drew stares and murmurs from the workers gathering for their pre-shift meeting, their eyes full of shock and envy. Ethan was all but pulled into the third-floor office. "Mr. Gu, what's going on?" he asked. Just then, there was a knock on the door. Gordon gave him a look, so Ethan got up to open it. Two men stood outside. One was his supervisor, Lewis. The other sent a jolt through him. The man wore a sharp, tailored suit, his leather shoes polished to a mirror shine, and he carried the unmistakable air of someone long accustomed to being in charge. As soon as Gordon saw him, he shot up from his chair like a spring, a massive grin on his face as he extended both hands. "Mr. Chairman, welcome." "The chairman?" Ethan's heart pounded. It was Miles Chen, from the drunken headquarters. He suppressed the turmoil inside him and stood quietly to the side. Miles Chen gave Gordon's hand a perfunctory shake. Then, his sharp eyes scanned past everyone, landing directly on Ethan. "And this young man is—" The air in Gordon Gu's office seemed to crystallize. The chairman from the drunken headquarters, Miles Chen, had a piercing gaze that swept over everyone before finally settling on Ethan. His tailored suit and polished shoes radiated an unquestionable authority. He didn't know who Ethan was, but he was intrigued by this young man who remained so composed in the presence of his manager and supervisor. "And this is—" Gordon quickly stepped forward, his voice thick with a mixture of reverence and excitement. "Mr. Chairman, this is Ethan Yu, from the finishing workshop on the first floor." Miles Chen merely gave a slight nod. "Oh," he said, then turned back to Gordon. "Your team did an excellent job on this latest batch of products. When we sent our samples to the client, they didn't even bother looking at the headquarters version. They chose yours immediately. It's a $30,000 order, and if you can maintain this quality, we can even raise the unit price." His words made both Gordon and Lewis breathe a little faster. But then Miles's tone shifted, his eyes sharpening. "I'd like to meet your engineer, Shaw. Did he make some adjustments to the data?" Lewis pulled a few twisted, deformed metal scraps from his pocket and gave a bitter smile. "Mr. Chairman, we almost failed to deliver. Engineer Shaw is on leave, back in his hometown. The data he left behind was all wrong." Miles's expression instantly darkened. He understood the gravity of that failure better than anyone. He looked around the room, his voice now carrying a distinct pressure. "Then who made this batch?" Gordon took a deep breath, no longer holding back. He grabbed Ethan, who was still observing from the sidelines, and gave him a gentle push forward. "Mr. Chairman, it was this kid. He's the one who corrected the data and led the team to produce these samples." In an instant, every eye in the room was on Ethan. A gleam of insight flashed in Miles Chen's eyes. He reevaluated the young man before him, his earlier casualness replaced by intense interest. "Young man, would you be willing to come to headquarters? Say the word, and I'll offer you $1,500 a month, plus benefits, insurance, and an annual bonus." 1,500. The number exploded like a thunderclap in the ears of Gordon and Lewis. Their hearts leaped into their throats. That was 3 or 4 times the salary of a regular worker at their branch. Who could possibly refuse such an offer? Yet, Ethan remained silent. He thought of the distance to Dongguan, of Iris carrying his child, of his parents and brother still living in the countryside. He looked up, meeting the chairman's gaze, his voice calm but unshakable. "Thank you for the generous offer, Mr. Chairman, but my family is here. I want to stay and take care of them." Gordon and Lewis could have cried with relief. Miles Chen was stunned for a moment, and then he burst into laughter, a sound full of genuine appreciation. "Excellent. A man of gratitude and responsibility. How about this? You come with me to Dongguan, help them set up the data, and once everything is stable, you come back. I'll pay you the headquarters salary, $1,000 a month. And for your contribution this time, I'm giving you an extra $1,000 in cash as a bonus. Plus, you'll get a 1% commission on that $30,000 order." With a grand gesture, he had the finance department bring in a stack of crisp, new $10 bills. The woman who brought them was trembling slightly. $1,000, just like that, given to the kid everyone used to consider a good-for-nothing. That evening, at the city's finest restaurant, the Lunar Pavilion, Ethan was the undeniable star of the show. After a few rounds of drinks, Louis Liu announced on the spot that, starting tomorrow, Ethan would be the official foreman of the CNC workshop's first shift. Gordon Gu also patted his shoulder earnestly, telling him to keep up the good work. Ethan toasted each of them, his words sincere, putting the three leaders at ease. But then he glanced at the clock on the wall. The hands were already creeping toward 5. He stood up abruptly. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Gu, Louis, I'm terribly sorry, but I have to leave. I need to pick up my wife from work. Gordon's face immediately fell, and Louis frantically tugged at his pants under the table. What a golden opportunity, and this kid was leaving for his wife. But Miles Chen watched him with great interest. Ethan added apologetically, my wife is pregnant, and I worry about her. Hearing this, Miles waved his hand, a knowing smile spreading across his face. Go on. A man who takes care of his family is a man of true character. Ethan flew on his bicycle through the evening breeze. He arrived at the department store just as the female workers were leaving in small groups. When Iris emerged from the main entrance, carrying her cloth bag, she thought she was hearing things when a familiar voice called her name. It wasn't until a colleague nudged her that she saw him, the man who had been on her mind all day, leaning against his bicycle, smiling at her. Ethan took the bag from her, patted the padded seat on the back of his bike, and said softly, Honey, get on. Let's go home. Iris sat down, and after a moment's hesitation, she wrapped her arms around his solid waist. As the bicycle moved smoothly away under the envious stares of her co-workers, she quietly rested her head against his broad back. Back home, Ethan efficiently reheated their dinner. A nosy neighbor came over, offering with false sincerity to find him a janitorial job. Ethan ignored him, but Iris's clear voice came from inside their room. Ethan, is dinner ready? I'm hungry. At the dinner table, Ethan told Iris about his promotion and new salary. When she heard $1,000 a month, her eyes filled with disbelief. It sounded fantastical, more than double what her own store manager made. How is that possible? Seeing her doubt, Ethan knew that no explanation would suffice. He put down his bowl, led Iris to the bed, then stood up and solemnly closed the door, even drawing the floral print curtain. Under her puzzled gaze, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the thick stack of $10 bills, a full 100 of them, and spread them out before her. Here's $1,000. It's a bonus from the main company. Iris was completely stunned. She reached out a trembling hand and touched the crisp new bills. The tangible reality of them finally shattered all her doubts and anxieties. Ethan's voice sounded in her ear, tinged with a subtle plea and a deep-seated fear. Iris, please, let's go quit your job tomorrow, okay? Iris looked up and saw the profound terror in his eyes, as if he was afraid she would vanish like a phantom. She finally understood. All his changes stemmed from this desperate fear of losing her. She nodded firmly, tears springing to her eyes. Okay, Ethan, I promise. The next day, Ethan and Iris were up before the sun. A cool morning mist still hung in the air, but their hearts were warm. Instead of his usual routine of starting the stove for breakfast, Ethan took Iris by the hand and led her out of the communal building. I'm taking you out for something good today, he said with a smile, his eyes overflowing with tenderness. He led her to a small bun shop he frequented, its sign proclaiming it served the best steamed buns in town. The steam billowing from the bamboo baskets carried an enticing aroma of wheat and savory meat, instantly chasing away the last vestiges of their sleepiness. The owner, a portly middle-aged man, greeted Ethan warmly. Ethan, here for some buns. Ethan guided Iris to a seat on the inside, away from the aisle, before replying. Fatty Sue, brought my wife to try your famous recipe today. The owner, Sue, glanced at Iris. He took in her quiet, pretty features with a flash of admiration, which quickly morphed into a look of pity, as if a prized flower were being wasted on a common weed. Ethan caught the look. Without a word, he shifted his body, subtly blocking the man's line of sight. Then he raised his voice. Fatty Sue, what are you staring at? Hurry up with the buns, or you'll have to rename your shop, the place nobody cares about. His joke made Iris stifle a laugh behind her hand and caused Sue to look away in embarrassment, bustling off to get their order. Ethan carefully picked up a bun, dipped it in vinegar, and placed it in Iris's bowl. Honey, try it. Just then, a loud voice boomed from the doorway. Ethan, you rascal, became a foreman without saying a word, and in the CNC workshop no less. Iris looked up to see a man in the same factory uniform entering. She didn't know him, but his words sent a jolt of warmth through her entire body. So he hadn't been lying. Yesterday wasn't a dream. He really was a foreman. He really was different now. An indescribable joy bubbled up from deep within her, and as she looked at her husband, who seemed so unbothered by the praise, her eyes began to sting. Tom, you're here for breakfast too. Ethan looked up. It was Tom Zhang, the foreman from his old workshop. Tom clapped him on the shoulder. Don't call me foreman anymore. We're equals now. The whole factory knows. Mr. Gu posted the announcement himself. Ethan took a nonchalant bite of his bun. It's not that big a deal. No need for all the fuss. His casual demeanor almost made Tom choke on his own food. After their meal, Ethan insisted on paying for Tom's breakfast as well. This display of social grace made Tom wonder to himself. This kid really has changed. Leaving the bun shop, Iris's mood was as bright and clear as the June sky. She clutched the cloth bag containing their small fortune and took the initiative. Ethan, let's go to the bank first. Half an hour later, they were sitting on the cool waiting benches of Bayside City Bank. In this era, debit cards were not yet common. Savings were recorded in a green passbook. As Iris handed the $900 and her ID through the teller window, her palms were slick with nervous sweat. When the teller handed back the newly issued passbook, she stared at the clearly printed numbers next to her name, and it all finally felt real. Outside the bank, Iris was about to tell Ethan the PIN she had set, but he stopped her. He looked into her eyes and said with utter seriousness, "Honey, you don't need to tell me the PIN. I trust you. All I need is for you to trust me." He wanted to give her the world, asking only for her complete faith in return. His words struck her heart with incredible force. She lowered her head, her voice as light as a feather, but perfectly clear. "Ethan, I trust you." He heard her. His eyes reddened, and he leaned down to press a deep kiss on her forehead. In that moment, he knew that the world he had lost for over 2 decades had finally come back. Their next stop was the department store. The process of quitting was surprisingly smooth. The store manager, who had once been dismissive of them, now handled the paperwork with professional indifference. Iris collected her final wages, $280, and walked out the main entrance feeling as though a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The sun was shining. Her life was beginning anew. "Come on, let's go to the hospital," Ethan said, his plan for the day already set. The city hospital was bustling, the air thick with the smell of disinfectant. After a series of tests, the most agonizing part was the wait for the ultrasound. Iris had to drink 2 large bottles of water and fidgeted uncomfortably as she waited. When it was finally her turn, Ethan tried to go in with her, but was firmly pushed out by the female technician, prompting light laughter from the other pregnant women in the waiting area. Ethan didn't mind, smiling sheepishly as he sat down, his heart pounding with more anxiety than he had ever known. 10 minutes felt like a century. When the ultrasound room door opened again, a technician handed him a report, looked at him with an odd expression, and remarked, "You've got some skills, kid." Before Ethan could figure out what she meant, Iris dashed past him and into the restroom. Once she emerged, looking much more comfortable, they went together into the obstetrician's office. The chief physician, a woman named Dr. Sue, looked at the ultrasound images, and a delighted smile spread across her face. "Congratulations to you both. Young lady, you're having twins. You're 8 weeks along, and both babies are developing very well." Twins. The word was like a bolt of lightning, exploding in both their minds. Iris was so excited she could barely speak. "Dr. Sue, are you sure? Are there really 2? Dr. Sue laughed at her reaction. Ethan, however, stood frozen, as if he'd been turned to stone. It wasn't until Iris tugged on his sleeve that he snapped out of his trance. He threw his arms around his wife, his voice filled with ecstatic disbelief. "Honey, this is amazing. I'm going to be a dad. A dad of 2. He finally understood what the technician's comment about his skills meant. On the way home, with Ethan pedaling and Iris sitting behind him, their hearts were filled to bursting with this double dose of happiness. Back in their room, Ethan settled Iris down and immediately started cooking. Seeing the beads of sweat on his forehead, Iris instinctively took out her handkerchief to wipe them away. Ethan dipped his head slightly. Her warm breath, her familiar scent, it stirred something in him, as if decades of loneliness were awakening all at once. He closed his eyes, forcefully suppressing the heat rising within him. At the dinner table, Ethan kept piling food onto Iris's plate. "You're eating for 3 now? You have to eat more." A blush colored Iris's cheeks. She asked shyly, "Ethan, do you want a boy or a girl?" Ethan smiled. He took her hand, looked into her eyes, and gave the most resolute answer of his life. "Honey, as long as they're from you, it doesn't matter if they're boys or girls. I'll love them just the same." The next morning's sunlight streamed through the window, gently illuminating Iris's sleeping face. Ethan rose silently. He went out and bought her favorite congee and steamed buns, placing them on the table to keep warm and leaving a note beside them. He wolfed down a couple of fried dough sticks with a glass of warm water for his own breakfast. Leaning over, he planted a soft kiss on his wife's forehead before closing the door and cycling off to the factory. It was a new day. He was no longer a slacker employee, but the foreman of the CNC workshop one. However, when he pushed open the workshop doors, he was met not with the expected bustle of activity, but with a lazy silence. The machines were idle. Workers were gathered in small groups, some smoking and chatting, others slowly eating breakfast. One man was even trimming his nails. A dozen pairs of eyes turned to him, their expressions a mixture of scrutiny, disdain, and open defiance. They treated him like he was invisible, building a solid wall of silence and disregard. Ethan understood immediately. This was a power play. He didn't get angry. He walked calmly into the small office in the corner as stifled snickers followed him. Look, the kid chickened out. A gambling addict thinks he can manage us? He's probably never even touched one of these machines before. The taunts buzzed around him like flies. Ethan ignored them. He picked up the logbook and a pen from the desk, turned, and walked back out to the center of the workshop. In that instant, the noise died down. All eyes fell on the book in his hand, the official tool for docking points and pay. I know you're not convinced. Ethan's voice wasn't loud, but it carried to every corner of the room. So today, anyone who has a problem with me, step forward. Let's have a competition. If I lose, this foreman position is yours. The words had barely left his mouth when a sturdy young man with a rebellious look in his eyes pushed through the crowd. His name was Leo Liu, the workshop's recognized top technician. I'll do it. A challenge is a challenge. I'm not afraid. Leo's voice was full of confidence. He had assumed the foreman position would be his, only to have it snatched away by a notorious paratrooper. He was simmering with resentment. Good, Ethan said, looking at him like a lion eyeing an ambitious wolf. You name the challenge. Let's start with the basics, Leo declared, full of confidence. Tool sharpening. He wanted everyone to see that this new foreman was all talk and no substance. The screech of metal on the grinding wheel filled the workshop. Sparks flew like golden fireflies, illuminating their focused faces. The other workers gathered around, the air thick with tension. 10 minutes later, they both stopped. When the two freshly sharpened tools were placed side by side on a tray, a collective gasp went through the crowd. Leo's tool was sharp and up to standard, a perfectly good piece of equipment. But Ethan's tool was a work of art. The curve of the blade was flawless, the entire edge gleaming with a uniform, cold light. It was no longer a tool, it was a masterpiece. The difference was undeniable. Leo's face went pale, but he gritted his teeth and issued a second challenge. Let's compete on product acceptance rate. Half an hour later, the quality inspector, his hands trembling as he held the micrometer to Ethan's finished product, practically shouted the result. Foreman, 100% acceptance rate. And the precision. It's also 100%. Zero deviation. Disbelieving, Leo rushed forward to check every measurement, every cut himself. After a long moment, he put down the tools, walked up to Ethan, and bowed deeply. His voice was hoarse, but utterly sincere. Foreman, I lost. I'm completely convinced. From now on, whatever you say, I, Leo Liu, will do it. The standoff ended in Ethan's overwhelming victory. He didn't reprimand anyone. Instead, he clapped Leo on the shoulder. You're already very good, he said, a simple phrase that made the tough young man's eyes well up. The atmosphere in the workshop thawed instantly, from icy confrontation to fiery enthusiasm. Just then, Supervisor Louis Liu ran in. Ethan, get to the manager's office, quick. Chairman Qian is on the phone for you. The announcement was another bombshell. Ethan followed Louis into the office where Gordon Gu was waving him over impatiently. He picked up the receiver, and Miles Qian's hearty, urgent voice came through. Ethan, I need you to come to Dongguan tomorrow. That order, it's been increased from 300,000 to 1 million. 1 million. The number made Gordon and Louis's hearts nearly leap out of their chests. Miles Qian was pressing him on one end of the line, and Gordon Gu was pacing anxiously on the other. But Ethan remained perfectly calm. He asked only two questions. Is travel reimbursed? Who's paying for accommodation? Only after the chairman promised that everything was covered, including a seafood feast, did he smilingly agree. After hanging up, Ethan struck while the iron was hot, suggesting to his two bosses that they appoint a deputy foreman to manage the workshop in his absence. The reasonable request was immediately approved. He returned to the workshop and, in front of everyone, handed the officially stamped appointment letter to Leo Liu. Leo was so moved he couldn't speak. In that moment, Ethan won the loyalty of his entire team. He arranged the work schedule and left for home early. At the market, he bought chicken, beef, pork, and even expensive apples, filling his basket to the brim. When he got home, however, he found Iris at the sink, washing clothes. He immediately took them from her, ignoring her protests, and began washing them himself. The neighbor, Sharon Zhang, poked her head out again, sneering that he'd become a man who served his wife. This time, Ethan didn't hold back. While deftly washing the clothes, he retorted loudly, I like it. My wife knows how well I'm doing. And my wife knows what kind of man I am. At least I don't beat my wife and kids. And then, as if no one was watching, he began to sing an old love song at the top of his lungs. The cheerful sound sent Sharon slamming her door shut in a huff. Iris stood by, watching her husband's broad back, and couldn't help but smile. After dinner, Ethan took her hand and told her about the business trip. A flicker of disappointment crossed her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by understanding and support. She pulled $100 from under the bed and pressed it into his hand. You'll be on your own. Keep some extra cash with you. That night, Iris, tired from her pregnancy, fell asleep quickly. But Ethan lay awake, watching his wife's face in the moonlight for a long time. Finally, he rose quietly, took the ultrasound report that announced their twins from her bag, and tucked it safely into his inner pocket. Then, He gently closed the door, got on his bicycle, and disappeared into the deep night. The night was as dark as ink. The silhouette of the local middle school was serene and solemn under the streetlights. Ethan parked his bicycle in the shadows and walked to a small nearby store to buy a cold bottle of orange soda. He went to the gatekeeper's window and politely handed the drink to the old man on duty. "Sir, could you please do me a favor? Please call the 7th grade language teacher, Ms. Elaine." The old man took the soda and looked him over. "Young man, who are you to teacher ye? I'm her son-in-law. My name is Ethan Yu. I need to see her about something urgent." Ethan stressed the word urgent. He knew that otherwise, his mother-in-law might not see him at all. The call connected, and he heard a familiar yet distant, gentle female voice on the other end. However, the moment the gatekeeper said the name, Ethan Yu, the line went dead with a sharp click. Ethan's heart sank with it. "Please, Mr. Zhao, just try one more time." Ethan begged, his hands clasped together, his eyes filled with a desperate sincerity. The old man was moved and dialed again. This time, he got straight to the point. "Teacher Yi, the young man says it's a matter of life and death. You should probably see him." There was a long silence on the other end before a cold voice replied. "Tell him to wait at the gate." Half an hour later, a middle-aged woman emerged. She wore a stylish blouse and skirt, her hair was tied up in a neat bun, and she wore black frame glasses. She was elegant, but her expression was as cold as ice. This was Iris's mother, Elaine. "Mom," Ethan called out, walking up to her eagerly. "Don't call me that." Elaine's voice was devoid of any warmth. "What is it?" Ethan swallowed the pain of her rejection and humbled himself. "Mom, Iris. She really misses you." "Did she miss us when she decided to cut off all contact?" Elaine sneered. "Are you out of money? Did she send you to borrow some?" Ethan took a deep breath and played his first card. "Mom, Iris is pregnant." Elaine's body visibly stiffened, but her expression quickly returned to one of cold indifference. "That's your business. You take care of your own wife." With that, she turned to leave. "I'm leaving for a business trip to Dongguan tomorrow." Ethan shouted after her. "I'm worried about Iris being home alone." Elaine's steps faltered for a second, but she didn't turn back. "Mom." Ethan watched her determined back, knowing that ordinary pleas were useless. He hardened his resolve. In front of all the passers-by, his knees buckled, and he knelt with a thud on the hard concrete. With red-rimmed eyes, he pleaded, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Mom, everything in the past was my fault. But Iris is innocent. She's pregnant with twins, and I'm scared. I'm terrified something will happen to her. Please, I'm begging you. Just go and take care of her for a few days." Twins. The word struck Elaine's heart like a hammer. She spun around and saw her son-in-law kneeling on the ground, sobbing. His raw sincerity, his profound fear for her daughter's well-being, finally shattered the wall of ice around her heart. "Get up. If you're not ashamed, I am," she said, walking quickly towards him, her voice trembling almost imperceptibly. When Elaine followed Ethan into the dim, cramped apartment and saw her daughter's thin face and the simple living conditions, her heart ached so much that tears almost fell. She shot Ethan a look of disapproval, but he made a solemn promise. "Mom, this is only temporary. I'll buy a new apartment by the end of the year." The moment Iris saw her mother, she froze, then threw herself into her arms like a child, bursting into tears. "Mom." That single word contained years of longing and sorrow. Mother and daughter wept together, the years of estrangement and resentment melting away in their hot tears. Later, behind closed doors, Elaine held her daughter's hand and asked about the twins. Iris showed her the ultrasound report. When Elaine saw the names of the city hospital and the chief obstetrician, Dr. Su, she was finally reassured. But a new question arose. Where did you two get the money for all these checkups? Iris puffed out her chest with pride. Ethan is a foreman now. He even got a $1,000 bonus a couple of days ago. $1,000? Elaine was skeptical. Iris, don't lie to me just to defend him. Where did that money really come from? Just then, there was a knock on the door. A young man who introduced himself as Ethan's colleague, Leo Liu, was there with a thick envelope. Foreman, Supervisor Liu asked me to bring you your salary and your ticket. In front of his mother-in-law, Ethan opened the envelope. Inside was $650 in wages, a sleeper car ticket to Dongguan, and a handwritten note from Manager Gu. It read, "You brat, do a good job and don't embarrass me. Here's a $300 bonus from the branch factory. Don't say it's not enough." The evidence was irrefutable. Elaine looked at the gruff note, then at her calm son-in-law. The last shred of doubt in her heart vanished. The good-for-nothing kid who had caused her so much grief had truly changed. Finally, she accepted him, from the bottom of her heart. Night fell, and the small room was lit only by a dim bedside lamp. Ethan held Iris tightly, his chin resting on the top of her soft hair as he whispered instructions. "Iris, I'm leaving tomorrow. Buy whatever you feel like eating, don't worry about the cost." Iris snuggled deeper into his embrace, finding a more comfortable position. Her voice was drowsy. "I know. You be careful over there too." She had heard that long-distance buses were unsafe these days. Ethan chuckled and ruffled her hair. Silly, I'm taking a sleeper train. It's perfectly safe. He didn't tell her that the Guangzhou train station in 96 was a chaotic and dangerous place, but he was a grown man and could handle it. He just didn't want her to worry. How long will you be gone? She asked, a clear note of dependence in her voice. 3 days at the shortest, a week at the longest. He could feel her heart slowly warming up to him. When you get there, call Mr. Zhang's store from a public phone and let me know you're safe, she murmured into his chest. Ethan's heart felt full to bursting. Okay, I'll call as soon as I arrive. He kissed the top of her head. Good night, honey. Later that night, however, Ethan was trapped in a nightmare. It was blood, that blinding crimson color again. She was wearing her floral blouse, falling from the high rooftop like a broken butterfly. Honey, don't jump. Come back, he screamed, reaching out, only to grasp at cold, empty air. He shot up in bed, gasping for breath, his body drenched in a cold sweat. A pair of warm hands gently touched his back. Ethan, did you have a nightmare? Iris had been woken by his shouts and was looking at him with concern. Seeing her alive and well beside him, Ethan finally broke free from the suffocating terror. He pulled her into a fierce embrace, his body still trembling slightly. Iris, just let me hold you, he said, his voice ragged as if it took all his strength. Iris didn't ask what he had dreamt about. She just gently patted his back, repeating over and over, "It's okay. It was only a dream." At 6 in the morning, the sky was already bright. Ethan got up quietly, tucking the thin blanket around his sleeping wife. He went out on his bike and bought her favorite steamed buns and warm soy milk, carefully placing them in a pot to keep warm. Then, he took their dirty clothes to the sink, washed them by hand, and hung them to dry on the line outside. When he was done, he glanced at the clock. It was just after 7. He stuffed a few changes of clothes into his backpack, secured his money and ID in an inside pocket, left a note on the table, and leaned down for one last kiss on his wife's forehead. As he stepped out the door, he ran into his mother-in-law, Elaine, who was just arriving. He quickly explained a few things, then hopped on his bicycle. With his mother-in-law's approving gaze on his back, he pedaled toward the train station without looking back. The 8 o'clock express train was already boarding, and a long line had formed at the gate. Ethan easily found his soft sleeper bunk, a relatively private space. After the train started moving, the carriage grew noisy. A middle-aged woman sidled up to his bunk and asked in a low, secretive voice, "Hey kid, want to buy some cigarettes?" Ethan saw through her ruse instantly. In this era, counterfeit cigarette sellers were common on trains. He played along for a moment. He simply held it to his nose, sniffed, and handed it back with a smile. "Ma'am, these don't smell right. I think I'll pass." Seeing the sale fall through, the woman started to make a scene, but Ethan didn't waste his breath. He simply called out, "Conductor." The woman scurried away like a scalded cat, muttering a curse as she disappeared into the next car. A young man his age on the opposite bunk had watched the whole exchange, his eyes wide. He gave Ethan a thumbs up. "Wow, brother, that was impressive." "How do you know they were fake?" "You can just smell it," Ethan replied nonchalantly. The young man scooted over, friendly and talkative. "My name's Kyle Qian. I'm heading to Guangzhou." "You, Ethan, you." "Same here." And just like that, the two young men began to chat as the train rattled along. 7 hours later, the train pulled slowly into Guangzhou station. As soon as Ethan stepped out of the gate, he saw a young man holding a sign with his name on it. After confirming his identity, the young man looked surprised. "You're Ethan, you? I didn't expect you to be so young." It turned out the chairman had sent his personal driver, Steve Lee, to wait for him. As they walked toward the parking lot, Ethan saw that Chairman Qian had come in person. The car door opened, and Miles Qian clapped Ethan warmly on the shoulder. "Ethan, it must have been a long journey. Get in." Ethan climbed into the back seat, only to find someone else already there, Kyle Qian, the young man he'd just met on the train. Miles pointed at his son and said with a laugh, "Ethan, let me introduce you. This is my son, Kyle." Then he turned to his son and barked, "You brat, this is the impressive young friend I wanted you to meet, Ethan." Kyle turned his head, and his face lit up in surprise when he saw Ethan. "Ethan, bro." Ethan was stunned. He never would have guessed that this friendly, talkative young man was the future heir to the entire corporation. The black luxury sedan pulled up smoothly before the gleaming entrance of the Washington Hotel. The driver, Steve Lee, had just gotten out to open the door for the chairman when he saw Miles Qian already opening the rear door himself, making a welcoming gesture to Ethan inside. Ethan's hand, halfway to pushing the door open, froze awkwardly in midair. What had he done to deserve the company's chairman personally opening his car door? The gesture felt so heavy, he was at a loss. Steve Lee's eyes nearly popped out of his head. Who was this young man? Not even the general manager received this kind of treatment. Seeing Ethan just sitting there, Miles Qian broke the silence with a laugh. "What? Are you going to make me hold the door for you all day?" That snapped Ethan out of it. He scrambled out of the car, flustered, repeating, "Mr. Chairman, you're too kind. I'm just a regular employee." As they walked into the hotel lobby, Kyle Qian immediately sidled up to Ethan, whispering mysteriously. Ethan bro, see that? I heard the receptionists here are all former beauty pageant contestants. You're in for a treat. Ethan followed his gaze. The two women at the front desk were indeed tall and elegantly made up. But he just smiled faintly, his thoughts drifting to his wife back home, with her plain face and the two shallow dimples that appeared when she smiled. Miles Chien checked Ethan in, handing him a key card to a premium suite and setting a welcome dinner for 5:30 in a private room. As Miles forcibly dragged Kyle away, who still wanted to follow Ethan upstairs, Ethan just shook his head and smiled at the comical father-son duo. At 5:30 sharp, Ethan arrived at private room number 5. When he opened the door, 4 men were already seated. Besides Miles Chien, there were 2 scholarly-looking middle-aged men with glasses and a stern-faced man with a heavy build. Ethan, you're here? Sit next to me, Miles said warmly, pulling out the adjacent chair. The moment Ethan sat down, he felt 3 pairs of scrutinizing, skeptical eyes on him. Miles made the formal introductions. This is Ethan, who I've temporarily brought over from the branch factory to help out. The men introduced themselves in turn. The 2 with glasses were headquarters engineers, Jordan Xiao and Holden Hua. The heavy-set man was the head of production, David Zhang. And the last man was the chairman's own cousin and the general manager of the main factory, Henry Chien. Ethan raised his glass and downed it in one go, adopting a humble posture. It's my first time here. I hope you'll all guide me. However, the engineer named Jordan Xiao had an unconcealed look of contempt in his eyes. He pushed up his glasses and asked in an interrogating tone, Brother Ethan, may I ask about your educational background? A bachelor's? Or a master's? The question froze the air in the room. Everyone knew it wasn't a question, it was a challenge. But Ethan seemed oblivious to the barb. He put down his glass and smiled calmly, his voice quiet but clear. I'm afraid I'm not that accomplished. I graduated from high school. A bomb went off in the quiet room. High school? Was the chairman joking? Letting a high school graduate come and instruct a group of university and postgraduate degree holders? The production head, David Zhang, was the first to frown. The general manager, Henry Chien, spoke up directly. Cousin, this can't be serious. Seeing he had support, Jordan Xiao became even more brazen, even nudging the silent Holden Hua next to him. Mr. Chairman, are you trying to humiliate us? Suddenly, everyone was voicing their objections and doubts. They even began discussing booking Ethan a return ticket, their words dripping with dismissal. Yet, at the center of the storm, Ethan acted as if nothing was wrong. He calmly helped himself to a piece of braised pork, then poured himself another glass of liquor, savoring it. His composure, his tranquility, stood in stark contrast to the surrounding uproar. Finally, when he had eaten and drunk his fill, he wiped his mouth with a napkin, stood up, and actually addressed the general manager and production head. Mr. Chien, then I'll trouble you to book my ticket for tomorrow. Mr. Zhang, could you also please prepare some fruits and chocolates for me to take back? My wife loves them. The hell you will. Miles Chien, who had been holding back his anger, slammed his hand on the table. The loud bang rattled the dishes. He pointed at every man in the room and roared. You're all so high and mighty. Do you have any idea that the client for that $1 million order specifically requested the quality produced by the branch factory? And that quality was achieved by him, a high school graduate you all looked down on, leading the team. He paused, his gaze as sharp as a knife as it swept over their frozen faces. I'm telling you, this company can do without any of you, but it can't do without him. If you manage to chase him away today, whoever can afford to pay the penalty for breaching that $1 million contract can get the hell out of my sight. His words crashed down like thunder. Jordan Xiao, David Zhang, Henry Chien, all their faces turned deathly pale. They finally understood what kind of powerful figure they had just offended. Inside the hotel's VIP suite, Ethan had just hung up the phone with his wife, a sweet warmth still lingering in his heart. He glanced over at Holden Hua, who was lying on the sofa watching him with a strange look, and knew the kid was getting the wrong idea. Just then, the doorbell rang. What are you smiling at? Go get the door, Ethan ordered gruffly. And remember, if it's a woman, send her away immediately, or you can get out too. Resigned, Holden dragged himself up and opened the door. Standing outside was, of all people, the general manager, Henry Chien. Mr. Chien, what are you doing here? Holden asked, stunned. Henry Chien walked past him and straight into the room. Seeing Ethan leaning against the headboard reading a book, he forced a smile that looked more painful than a grimace. Little brother Ethan, I was blind before. I hope you can be the bigger person and not hold it against me. With that, he carefully took a vintage-looking bottle of brandy from his bag and placed it on the coffee table. This is from '88. I've been saving it. A little something for you to enjoy. Ethan glanced at the bottle, understanding perfectly, but feigned indifference. Mr. Chien, I can't accept gifts for no reason. Only after Henry Chien's near-desperate apologies did Ethan reluctantly accept the bottle and agree to come to the factory the next day. The general manager left as if he'd been granted a royal pardon. No sooner had he left than the doorbell rang again. This time, it was the production head, David Zhang. also carrying an even older bottle of brandy from '86, his posture even more deferential than Henry's. In one evening, the two leaders who had treated him with such contempt were lining up to offer gifts and apologies. The dramatic scene left Holden Hoa completely dumbfounded. The next morning, after a lavish buffet breakfast at the hotel, Ethan rode with Chairman Chien to the factory. The previous night's drama seemed to have never happened, but everyone knew that today, the workshop floor would be a battlefield that decided many fates. As they entered the CNC workshop, all the workers stopped what they were doing, the air tense and oppressive. Ethan walked to a machine, picked up a newly made part, and said calmly, "The tolerance for this product is plus or minus 0.2 millimeters. You've achieved 0.15, which is quite good, but it can actually be made with 0 deviation." Before he could finish, an angry voice erupted. "What nonsense are you spouting? A high school graduate has no right to point fingers here. Go back to your farm." It was Jordan Xiao. His face was red with fury as he snatched the part from Ethan's hand, his words dripping with ultimate humiliation. The crowd of workers burst into laughter. Miles Chien's face turned livid with rage, and he was about to fire Jordan on the spot. But Ethan stopped him. He looked at Jordan, his eyes as calm as a placid lake. "I'll make this product for you myself. If I achieve 0 deviation, what will you do? If you can make it with 0 deviation, I, Jordan Xiao, will be at your disposal." Jordan scoffed as if he'd heard the world's greatest joke, accepting the challenge without hesitation. The entire workshop fell silent. All eyes were fixed on Ethan. He walked to the machine, his fingers flying across the control panel like lightning as he reprogrammed the data. He changed the cutting tool, calibrated it, and started the machine. The roar of the machinery started up again, but this time, the sound was more gripping than ever. 15 minutes later, when the first new part was finished, the quality inspector took his micrometer and measured it again and again. His hands began to shake uncontrollably, his voice trembling with excitement. "Mr. Chairman, I've measured it. It's a perfect pass. And, with 0 deviation. 0 deviation." Those two words echoed like thunder in everyone's minds. Jordan Xiao grabbed the micrometer and measured it himself. When the cold, precise data stared back at him, all his pride and disdain shattered. He staggered back a few steps, his face ashen, unable to say a single word. In that moment, the workshop was utterly silent. All the previous mockery and doubt had transformed into silent shock and admiration. With his undeniable skill, Ethan had become a legend. With the technical problem solved, production on the $1 million order officially began. The workers now looked at Ethan with awe. Henry Chien and David Zhang were beyond relieved. Those 2 bottles of brandy had been well worth it. With business concluded, Miles Chien smiled at Ethan. "All right, there's nothing left for you here. I'll have my son take you out for a bit." He knew Ethan wanted to buy a gift for his wife. As they reached the factory gate, Kyle's car was already waiting. Miles Chien took a small, elegant box from his pocket and pressed it into Ethan's hand. "Take this. It'll be useful." Before Ethan could refuse, he was pushed into the car. Inside, a curious Kyle snatched the box and opened it. Lying on the velvet was a mechanical watch with a black leather band, its face glittering with what looked like tiny diamonds. "Ethan bro, try it on." Ethan couldn't refuse such a generous gift. He looked at the new watch on his wrist, but his mind was on something else. He turned to Kyle. "Do you know where the nearest jewelry store is?" He was going to get Iris a long overdue promise, a wedding ring.